This podcast contains spoilers for Nightmare Alley, which spoils the movie it was adapted from 75 years ago, which also spoils the book it was based off of the year before. You know what? Just forget it. Spoiler alert for all three of those things. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cinephile Gamers Podcast. I am your host, Bo Smith. This week we are going to be delving into the Oscar movies, and by this week I mean we're going to start with the first movie that we have watched, and so far my wife and I have only watched one of the 10 nominated Best Picture films, and we are going to be going through and seeing each movie and giving our opinions. Unfortunately, she could not join me on today's podcast, so maybe she will be joining me on a future one. So today's first episode is going to be delving into the 2021 remake of Nightmare Alley, as directed by Guillermo del Toro. It stars Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Toni Collette, and William Dafoe and Rooney Mara as their main bill cast. The story of Nightmare Alley is about a person who is running away from his past. Bradley Cooper's character, his name is Stan in the movie. You're not really sure why he's running away, but he ends up on a bus ride to a carnival where he walks around this carnival, sees the different attractions, and then ends up helping some of the carnies gear up for some of their performances, and then ends up actually becoming one of the carnies themselves. What makes it really interesting is as the story moves along on here, he learns more about different acts that goes on and wants to impersonate one of the people that are in the carnival. His name is Pete, I believe, who used to be a mentalist, and Pete himself was just one of those people that felt guilty about tricking people and lying to people. It really weighed heavy on his conscience, got him to start drinking, and so he was just like, nope, I am done with that, and I'm going to be separated from that, although he kept the drinking, which plays a little bit of a factor early on in the movie. What I did find interesting going into this movie is that it is actually a remake of a 1947 movie by the same name, Nightmare Alley. But there are a lot of vast differences between the two movies from what I have read. I have not actually watched the original. Maybe that is something I should have gone in and done ahead of time, but I honestly don't even know where I would be able to look up the original Nightmare Alley. As far as differences go, and we might be getting into some spoiler territory, so if you have not yet watched the movie, want to watch it before you listen to this review, then I would go ahead and do that. But here's just a few of the big differences between the two. Obviously, the violence is going to be one of the bigger differences since it was made in 1947 originally. It's going to be very light on some of the darker tones of the movie. And of course, this movie is directed by Guillermo del Toro, who is the master of dark filming. So it's going to be a lot of violence. I mean, right off the bat, you see a guy eat a chicken head. So lots of blood squirting everywhere, just a dark setting of a movie. And of course, there's other things that happen later on in the movie too that are pretty graphic. Stan's father has a little bit more of a backstory to it as compared to the original, which kind of plays into his character. The beginning of the movie, from what I have read too, is that he starts right off in the carnival and it picks up from there at the very first movie. This one, it kind of shows him leaving his house, dragging a body across the floor, which is not going to be a spoiler because this is literally the first 3 minutes of the movie that this happens. And you're kind of wondering, oh, what's he doing with the body? What's he running from? That sort of thing. The geek, which for a little bit more clarification, is what they call this animal man, and it's someone who's just basically unhinged, just is not acting like a normal human being at all. Willem Dafoe's character in this goes into more depth about why they teach someone to geek, and it's actually kind of a cruel thing of they have this person who drinks a lot, that they lure them in with more drinking, and they also start to poison their drink with opium. That way they get drugged and they stay in this kind of catatonic state of not wanting to get better and also not improving at all and feeling like there's nothing left for them as well. It doesn't really go into explanation of that, or they try to veer away from that in the original movie, but I really like that as well. And then, of course, Cate Blanchett's character, Lilith Ritter, Dr. Lilith Ritter, she adds more psychoanalysis sessions that you don't see in the original movie, which I really like these in this movie. It's a very good character dive into both Stan and Lilith that I believe is essential to the movie as well. Something that's very unique and really shows off these actors and their prowess in this movie as well. All right, so let's get on with what I really liked about this movie. So first off, along with being nominated for Best Picture, it's also nominated for cinematography, costume, and production. And I've got to say, right off the bat, Guillermo del Toro, it's a very striking movie visually. It's very grimy. It takes place between 1939 1941 because they mentioned World War II a couple times and then the U.S. getting into the war. But it is very vintage 1940s, very grimy, dark. Whenever it shows different scenes from the carnival, you really see like the brightness and the colors pop off, but it's still like in this kind of dark, shadowy kind of tones and colors of the movie. Some of the other production that was really cool, what I thought was Dr. Lilith's office. It's very gold-plated, very ornate and fancy looking whenever you go to her psychoanalysis sessions. Very beautiful as well. Really neat to see. So I marked on my page while reviewing this that production had 3 underlines, so I really feel like this movie is going to get the win whenever it comes to best production design. Next up is costumes, and I really liked how they designed these costumes. It's not just the fancy suits that you see later on in the movie, but some of the carnival workers, how their costumes just pop out for their different acts, as well as just how afterwards, after shows are done, how grimy everything looks, how kind of dirt poor as well everything looks from these carnies that you see in general. Cinematography, beautiful, just beautiful all around. As I mentioned, it has a vintage 1940s style to it. Of course, with Guillermo's work, it's very dark, dirty, but it's a wonderful setting. You really feel immersed into this world of Nightmare Alley, and the visuals are just striking all around. One of the things that I really did like too is the first half of the movie, whenever you watch Stan in the carnival as they're searching around looking for the geek whenever he escapes at one point, because you go into the little spooky madhouse area, and as soon as you walk in, you're like, oh, this is very Guillermo del Toro style because of the practical effects over the digitally edited effects. The demon's head into the madhouse opens up and you're like, oh, this is very his style. I really like how this looks. Everything is very cool in the practical nature, which is one of the things I really like about Guillermo del Toro in his directing style is he tries to use as much practical effects as possible. And then if there's anything that needs to be touched up in a visual effects, he can do that later, which is super nice. You don't see a lot of directors doing that nowadays, aside from your Christopher Nolan types. Now let's get into some of the actors in here. Bradley Cooper, just charming as always. I don't really know what I can add about that because he's always charming in all of his films. So it really comes into play in the second half as well, whenever he does use his mentalist tricks on other people to get more shows or money or deals or whatever happens in the second half of the movie. Cate Blanchett is good at being sinister. She matches Bradley Cooper in that charmingness whenever she does enter into the movie. And you really like it in her psychoanalysis scenes because you know there's a lot more that's hiding under the surface whenever they do their psychology sessions, and there's a lot more that she's letting on than she wants to tell Bradley Cooper or any other of the characters out there. I really liked Toni Collette's performance as well. She has a minor role in this movie. She's one of the carnies, but she does help establish a relationship with Stan and helps Pete in teaching him some of the mentalist tricks and inspires his love for that as well. Rooney Mara is also the love interest for Bradley Cooper's character. And I liked her performance in here. It's a bit understated as well. I feel like the movie could have focused on her a little bit more. She's in it for a good chunk of the movie as well. And I like the chemistry that they have between each other, but it doesn't seem like she has a lot to do in some parts. So she gets pushed to the background, essentially. Willem Dafoe also has a smaller role in this movie, but he is the carny ringleader. And I really like each scene he's in. And I feel like he's been getting a lot of great roles lately and work done. And it's really showing off how he should be in more movies. But he does a really good job in this movie, especially with his monologue about how he turns people into a geek and that setup on that, which becomes a really important factor later on in the movie too. This movie also does a good job of really foreshadowing aspects of what's to come in the movie. Whenever Stan goes into the funhouse, you see the mirrors that show the sins of people, and greed and lust is shown as he walks past them, and he even looks into the mirror as well, which will go on to influence his character later into the movie. And as we mentioned before, the geek sequence, whenever Willem Dafoe talks about that, it really goes on to show why the geek is an important character into the movie and how it becomes a central point to Stan's character later on as well. Now, let's get into some of maybe what might be a turnoff for this movie. It is a slow burn of a movie. It does keep you interested for those that are like, oh, this is very mysterious. I really want to know more about what's going on, what's going to happen next. But it is a slow burn of a movie. I'd say about an hour in, we watched the time and we were just like, oh, wow, there's still at least another hour and a half left in this movie. So it does pick up towards the second act of the movie. And it does keep you enthralled about where it goes next specifically. Now, this is not to say that it is a boring movie right off the bat. It's just a little bit slower pacing initially. There's probably some things that can be cut out. This is always the hardest part for me, because I'm just like, well, this does seem essential to the movie. This doesn't seem essential. I will say the first few minutes of the movie probably could have been cut out, where it just shows him walking into the carnival, and that could have been the intro to the movie necessarily, and not him dragging the body out and burning the house that he was in at the beginning. There's also a scene where Willem Dafoe and Bradley Cooper drop off the geek at a homeless shelter because they have no more use for him. I feel like that part could have been taken out. That would have saved a few minutes there as well. But for the most part, it seems like a lot of the scenes in this movie are essential for your viewing. So I don't know what else you could actually take out as well. But overall, this is my biggest complaint with the movie, is that it's just a little bit of a slower pace. I really like all of the other things that it brings to the table as well. So all in all, gets a really good grade in my book, which I'll give a final score at the end. All right. So now that we've kind of gone over all those aspects, what I want to go ahead and do is get into the spoiler territory of the movie, if you feel like you haven't been spoiled on the movie yet. So here's what happens in the rest of the story. If you don't want to listen, tune out now. So Bradley Cooper, as I mentioned before, wants to become a mentalist, and he learns from Pete, his mentor, but Pete doesn't want to teach him all the tricks because he doesn't want Bradley Cooper to develop these feelings of guilt like he once had. So Bradley Cooper ends up killing him by switching out his bottle of alcohol with some floor wax wash, I believe. It was right next to the alcohol. And then he takes his book of tricks. He then takes Rooney Mara's character, they fall in love, and they decide to leave the carnival together and start this mentalism career as their own. And so it flashes forward 2 years, and they have both become really big stars in this, but he wants more. He's always looking for the next big cash grab. And so this is where Cate Blanchett's character comes in, as during a show, she interrupts and says, this is all a trick. They're using signals to alert each other, and which is true, but Bradley Cooper knows what he's doing and is actually able to figure out what is in Cate Blanchett's purse, and is able to delve into her past and really get under her skin. So after the show, she comes up with a proposition for him to get into the judge's good side and help reach out to his dead son who lost his life during World War One. And so after he helps the judge out, another wealthy gentleman by the name of Ezra comes along and wants to reconnect with his now deceased wife. And this man holds a lot more power than the judge. He's extremely wealthy, but Cate Blanchett's character is able to give him information on Ezra's past and able to help move along that plan in motion, and that they would split the earnings from whatever he was given. Now, throughout the story, Bradley Cooper's character takes pride in the fact that he has never touched alcohol in a day in his life, as opposed to his father. And so he stays away from alcohol vehemently. But as he gets closer to Cate Blanchett's character, she's able to convince him to just drink a little bit and live a little bit as well. And so it starts to unhinge his character and really devolves his relationship with Rooney Mara's character as well. As they are setting up a final plan to get Ezra out of their hair and kind of take the last little bit of money that they can get out of him, he wants Bradley Cooper to materialize his now deceased wife. That way he can say his apologies to her. And the way he does this is by having Rooney Mara dress up as Ezra's deceased wife. And Rooney Mara is just like, okay, this is the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm gone. And they agree that they're going to part ways after this. Well, things go sideways as when she does appear in front of Ezra, Ezra goes up and starts touching her and saying how sorry he is. But as he looks closer at her face, he realizes this is not my wife. This is an imposter. And so the jig is up and they have to escape. And this is where the movie really takes a violent turn. Definitely something that was not in the original movie is that he knocks out Ezra, breaks off his nose, and just leaves him for dead, essentially. And as they're escaping, Ezra's right-hand man starts shooting at the car and they run over him just to get away. Very gruesome. It was one of those jaw-dropping moments where both Mackenzie and I were like, whoa, this took a really bad turn. And so, as Bradley Cooper is going back to Cate Blanchett to get the rest of the money, she gives him his half of the money, and he pulls out money out of the bag and realizes these are all ones. This is not all of the money, in which case he turns around and Cate Blanchett shoots him right in the ear and really affects him. And this is where you find out, oh, this is crazy. Yeah. Because after that show, she was like, I'm plotting my revenge. And she started telling him about like how she really hated him after that show. And she was figuring out a way to get back at him. And this was the way she was going to go about it. And so she alerts the police that, of course, he killed Ezra, and that he was about to go and kill her as well. So he escapes and runs off onto a train and escapes from the city. And it's at this point, Bradley Cooper has nothing left in his life. He decides to get rid of his last possession, which is his father's watch, just so he can have another bottle of alcohol. And he sees a carnival come into town. And so he goes up to the carny leader and he's just like, look, I have this mentalist act that I'm pretty good at. And the carny leader's like, no, mentalism's not really something I want to get into. And he's just like, I'm so sorry. There's nothing else I can do for you. And he sees Bradley Cooper breaking down. And he's like, I do have a temporary job opening up, and it's just something that you might want to do, but I'll let you see. Have you ever heard of a geek? And Bradley Cooper just kind of perks up at it. He knows what goes on with a geek's life and that what it can lead to, and just it would pretty much be the end of his humanity. And as soon as he says that, he goes, sir, I was born to play a geek. And he just starts breaking down in tears, and that's the end of the movie. It's a very sad, twisted, emotional ending, but this was not the ending that was shown off in the original movie. In the original movie, it's something along the lines of Rooney Mara's character coming back and finding Stan and helping him out of his homelessness, and they end up falling back in love with each other, which it's not a satisfying ending, just because Bradley Cooper's character does not deserve that kind of attention. He really does deserve what's coming to him, and unfortunately, it's the life of being a geek. So, what are my final thoughts on this movie? As a adapted screenplay of what was originally a novel, then adapted to a movie and remade into another movie 75 years later, I really think this is a solid movie. Guillermo del Toro brings his signature style of directing into a movie that probably needed a darker tone and more serious tone than what it had originally received. Bradley Cooper, Rooney Mara, Willem Dafoe, Toni Collette, Cate Blanchett all give great performances. And overall, it is just a movie that you will want to see from start to finish because you want to know how things progress. You really want to know how Bradley Cooper goes from rags to riches, then back to rags, and even worse. So since this is the first movie I've actually done a review for, I haven't established a rating system, but what I had in mind was going on a score from 0 to 10. And so I'm going to give this movie a solid 7.5 out of 10. It's definitely something that you're going to watch. Don't know if it's something that you are going to want to watch multiple times, maybe a second time just to kind of get the deeper references, foreshadowing, any details you might have missed, but one that you probably are not going to want to watch unless it's maybe time for spooky season or something along those lines. As far as what I think it will win, like I mentioned before, it's definitely going to win Best Production in my eyes. Costumes, I think it has a serious chance for. Cinematography is really good. Really going to have to watch some of these other movies that are nominated for it just to make sure who would actually win that. As far as Best Picture goes, since this is the first of the 10 movies I'm watching, I don't really have anything to base it off of, but from some of the Oscar buzz that I have heard, like Power of the Dog and Don't Look Up, it's going to be in some tough competition, so I don't know if I'm going to necessarily give this the number one spot as far as Best Picture goes. But we'll see how it goes from there. Now, guys, this is going to be the first of a hopefully 10 movie series. The only one I'm not really sure if I'm going to be able to watch is Drive My Car because I have not seen where it has been released on any streaming services, and it is a Japanese film as well. So it's going to be a lot harder to find unless I can not pirate it, or maybe it might be on a Redbox somewhere. The other one that I might have trouble watching is Coda, which is an Apple Films production, so I would actually have to download another streaming service. But for you guys, I want to make sure I deliver on some good reviews and some good results as well to let you know what movies you should watch. As far as other movie reviews or video game reviews goes, it would be a dishonor to our podcast name not to review a video game movie, and Uncharted is coming out later this week, so I will definitely be giving that a watch and letting you guys know if it stands up as not only a good movie, but a good adaptation from its video game counterpart. Well, guys, that is it for this week's episode. And last time I did not have outro music going, so this time let's get this outro music playing. That way it's a more official podcast. Thanks, guys, for joining me again. Can't wait to talk to you next time.